Hi, guys. Thanks so much for coming to the Let It Go, Flow, and Grow podcast. I am your host, Rubes. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about the lore of the Nephilim, giants, and Bigfoot. I actually ended up recording this entire episode, but I felt like it wasn't very organized, and I felt like there was more that I could research. And boy, was I right, because I ended up jumping down the rabbit hole and I ended up basically having to stop researching because there's just so much evidence and so much discourse and discussion around this topic. And so I just decided, okay, I'm just going to cut it here. And this is what I got. But fun fact, as I always have a fun fact for you, and I will put a bit of a trigger warning out about this. It is about women giving birth. Okay. So here is the fun fact. Did you know that the reason, or a possible reason as to why women give birth lying down, is because King Louis XIV actually had a bit of a kink. It turns out that he actually might have enjoyed watching his wives give birth to his 22 children. And there's been a lot of discourse around this. The scientist or doctor, I guess, Francois Morisot, who came up with this new birthing technique of having women laying on their backs, was very much pushed by King Louis XIV. Prior to that, for centuries and thousands of years, even seen in ancient hieroglyphs, I mean, women were giving birth either squatting, kneeling, or on their hands and knees. And it wasn't until the 1700s, whenever Francois Morisot ended up coming out with this new technique of giving birth, and you know, King Louis XIV started pushing it pretty hard. And if you know anything about King Louis XIV, you'll know the fact that he had a birthing stool, which is where he used to watch the births from. So it cannot be confirmed nor denied whether or not that's the real reason. But I don't know. There's a lot of evidence pushing in that direction. So let's jump into the main show. Okay, so as I said, there is so much background and evidence that goes into the lore behind the Nephilim, the giants, and Bigfoot, and them in totality. So I'm just going to jump in. This is a detour episode, so this is definitely one of those like more random episodes, I guess you could say. I love doing episodes like these. So it is said that the Nephilim come from the sons of God. They were the watchers, and they mated with the daughters of Adam. And they were said to be destroyed in the Great Flood. However, through the Bible and in our society, they have popped up time and time and time and time again, way after the Great Flood. I mean, even in the Bible, which is very interesting to me because I feel like this topic is very taboo in the Christian culture. Like, I think that if, like, I don't go to church now, not saying that I wouldn't ever go back to church. It's just that my walk has been more isolated these days. But growing up, I don't think that I could have brought up the topic of Nephilim in the church. I think that that definitely would have been not beat out of me. Why did that come to mind? I just think that it just wouldn't have been like a okay topic. So I feel like it's kind of a taboo topic. I don't know. Anyways, but it is mentioned in the Bible. They're mentioned in the Bible in Genesis and Ezekiel and Peter's and Numbers and Revelation alone. And I don't know if they're mentioned more than that. I know that there's like David and Goliath, for example, that comes in later in the Bible whenever David ends up beating a giant, which is Goliath. So other than in the Bible, in different cultures in our society, there have been so many different accounts of giants. And so, like some theories say that they came from space. A more current theory that we've been working on is that the Neanderthal species and the Cro-Magnon species bred a new generation that ended up creating the giants race. And with there being an ice age 100,000 years ago, this would have given them enough time and strength to get to America, explore all of America, and settle down. But regardless of how they showed up and how they came to be, like I said, many cultures have passed down the different stories of giants from generation to generation and how they lived alongside humans. There were three main races that I was kind of able to get from the research that I did. There were those with the red hair and the red beards, those with the black hair and black beards, and the Anunnaki. And I don't know if the Anunnaki and the black hair and black bearded were the same. I'm not sure about that. But the Nemnirs, or the Sitka, were the giant race in Atlantean times, and they were mostly white-skinned redheads that were fighting with humans. They were way more primitive as well, and they were cannibalistic. And they were definitely said to exist before humans. And some legends state that they were not actually cannibalistic, but that they just didn't want to be bothered, and they kept to themselves in the northern parts of North America, where there were many caves and it was much older. They had very small families. And some believe that they just wanted to be alone and do their own thing. Some accounts do not align with that at all, and I will tell you of those accounts. The black hair and the black haired and the black bearded coexisted with humans, it seems, but then later they were fought off and killed. So I'm unsure if they're the same as the Anunnaki. And then the Anunnaki were supposed to be a giant race that were much kinder to humans. They coexisted with them, they taught them. And they were an advanced race that they helped humans prosper. They helped them move forward by teaching them how to grow crops, have different ways to travel around the world, the different moon cycles, etc. And they also helped humans understand that even though giants were much larger and they had these great powers, they still had emotions, which showed that they were not much different than humans themselves and the possibility or the capabilities that humans could tap into. So I'm going to go region by region. It's important to note that there are stories from all over the world with giants and in their existence at some point, whether it be recent or 10,000 years ago. And I didn't know how to break it up. So that's why I'm just going to try to do it region by region. In Egypt, in Egyptian culture, they were seen as gods and royalty. And in others, they were seen as cannibalistic and primitive. In Iraq and areas of Africa, which would be Mesopotamia, it was written in ancient texts that this race came from space, as they were descendants of the Anunnaki, but then later they moved to North America. And it was said that the texts stated that the giants were told to move by one of their leaders. And when they did this, they mated with other hominids, and the women were having C-sections to give birth to these very, very large babies. In China, those in Imperial China, they were said to be 15 feet tall in height, and they stood guard for the palace. Okay, so even that is like so many different regions or different sides of the world. And then we have Mexico and the Spaniards. In Mexico, the Tlaxcalans had legends of destroying many of the Aztec giants, and later they ended up banding together with the Spaniards to take over the Aztecs, and they ended up showing the Spaniards proof of their success against the giants. They had very large bones from the giants, and one leg bone was the same height as one man. Okay. And in Norway, it is said that 500 years before Columbus came to America, the Viking group, with the leadership of Leif Erikson, ended up at what is now Newfoundland and encountered large beast-like men who were extremely hairy, quote unquote, extremely hairy, ugly, and had great black eyes. And these larger men were towering over the Norsemen, even though the Norse travelers were at least 7 feet tall. They also called the beast Skellring, and it is said that this might be the origin of the legend of Bigfoot that still is in North America today. And alongside that, if you read any Norse mythology, you'll notice that there are many, many stories of them battling giants. Moving on to Native American tribes. The black bearded giants. See, this is why I'm confused as to whether or not the black bearded giants were the Anunnaki because of this story. Um, but then it seems that the black bearded, black haired might have been part of the Native American tribe. So I get kind of confused with that. But it said that black bearded giants were wiped out from legends told from the native tribes from the Chippewa, Sandusky, and Tawa tribes that told of a very ancient war. For the Nemnirs or the Sitka, it is said that they mixed with humans at one point, which is a theory as to why the North Dakota's Mandan tribe has red hair and blue eyes with some of their descendants to this day. The Sitka was a tribe of red haired giants, as said before, that planned to wipe out the human race, but the Paiute tribe was determined to fight. The Sittikas were vegetarian mostly, but they ended up resorting to cannibalism any time that they ended up finding a Paiute. And after many years of harassment, the Paiutes all banded together to take down the Sittikas. They attacked them all at once and they cornered them, killing many and forcing the rest to dwell in caves. And it is said that they piled up wood and brush over the cave's entrance and shot flaming arrows at the wood and brush, keeping the giants in the caves forever. So, I mean, no matter what the different region is, it seems that the Sittikas or the Nemnirs, the red-haired giants, were not friendly. But the black-haired giants didn't seem to be as much of a problem. But then they ended up having that war, so I'm not really sure. I guess I'll just have to get in my time travel thing and go back in time, if only. Okay, so now moving on to the colonizers. There is a lot of written evidence from different colonists who speak of giants from their expeditions. In 1519, Magellan went westward to finish the quest of Christopher Columbus, and one of his members was Antonio Pigafetta, who kept a journal describing in detail everything that had been seen in their 3 year expedition. He documented meeting very nice Native Americans whenever they landed in Argentina. Also, for the record, so many different like journal entries all say that Native Americans, whenever they would land like in their regions, they were so kind. So I don't understand why we pillaged, um, but I have my thoughts on that. So anyways, they ended up finding very huge footprints in the snow, and they later met a naked man who was twice the size of a normal man. He was naked, dancing, singing, and throwing dust on his head. So Magellan sent one of his men to the giant to mimic the giant's actions as a sign of peace. And they were able to lead the giant back to the campground, and the giant pointed upward, thinking that Magellan and his crew had come from the sky. They were only as tall as the giant's waist, and they named this race the Patagonias, which means big footed, and they live in Patagonia, which I've heard of the store Patagonia, but I had no idea that it was a. I mean, actually, I did know that it was a place, but I had no idea that it had any connection to Bigfoot. Like, I didn't know that that's what it translated to. So, very interesting. In 1579, a chaplain from the Francis Drake expedition wrote about his own experiences with giants as well, documenting that their crew had also met Patagonians and their heights were close to 7'5". And around 1594, William Adams stated that he fought extremely tall natives in Tierra del Fuego, which was further south than Patagonia. And in 1766, this was supposed to be the last documentation of Patagonians that we know of from John Byron, who said to have seen a tribe of 9 foot tall natives in Patagonia. Later on his book, though, and documentation, it was changed that he only saw 6'6" giants. And I guess the question is, why did the documentation change? And that's going to come up a little bit. That's going to come up a little bit later. I don't know if you just heard that. I don't know what that was. That sounded like an airplane that like was crashing. What the hell? I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was a car speeding by. That sounded like a really close airplane overhead, which is weird because I'm not near the airport. Anyways, I hope everyone's okay. Moving on. All giants were all documented to be very kind as long as you did not cross them in any form. And a Spanish explorer did end up crossing an Indian chief named Tuscaloosa, who was a 9 foot black haired giant when exploring what now is Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. He also documented seeing 9 foot tall natives from the tribe as well, but he ended up attacking the chief and lost, and later came back and set their fort on fire, killing not only Tuscaloosa's son, but also many of his tribe. However, the chief, Tuscaloosa, was never found. And it's said that he might have been the last black haired, black bearded giant. Okay, so moving forward to the evidence and its disappearance. Remains of giants have been found all over North America for over the last 200 years, but a lot of it has gone missing. Native American lands had mounds that still exist today that could be built in different shapes to help with giants' resting spots. And around the world, there are dolmens, which are massive rocks that show that a giant is buried nearby, meaning that they were probably somebody of royalty. And again, in some cultures, giants were upper class, the high priest of people building these structures in these different communities. These mounds are found all over America, showing where giants were buried near. Um, and they're found mostly in Mississippi, Tennessee, Illinois, and Ohio. Ohio is the home to the Great Serpent Mound, which is 3 feet high and 1,348 feet long. Many skeletons of giants have been found here. Other evidence includes Minoan double axes, which are 10 to 12 feet long, about 4,000 years old, and they're shown in a museum in Greece. And then there's the 12.5 foot sword that is found in Japan. In Denmark, there's huge Bronze Aged axes. There's also the stone heads on Easter Island. There's the Olmec colossal heads in Mexico. There's enormous footprints in Patagonia. In Morocco, there's many giant tools that were found. And there's also been many giant skeletons that have been found, including a giant's skull that had 2 rows of teeth. And the giant skeleton was 12 feet tall and was surrounded by burial offerings, meaning that he probably was somebody who was of royalty. There was also a 7 foot tall giant found in an ancient tomb. Now, continuing with this evidence, from the late 1800s till now, over 1,500 newspaper articles have been released about giant skeletons being discovered. There have also been over 100 large human footprints found still in Earth or on Earth. And actually, in 1918, there was a person who was a giant who was born to Harold and Addie Wadlow, and he ended up being 8'11". His name was Robert Wadlow, and he passed away at 22. And I'm going to do something that I haven't done before. I'm going to share my screen. So if you're listening, you might be able to look this up on your own, or you can look this up on YouTube or on Spotify. But I am going to share the screen. So here it is. Okay, so this is is it Robert Wadlow? Yes, Robert Wadlow. He again passed away at the age of 22. He is 8'11", and this is in 1918. We have photographic evidence that gigantism is still in our society. So that is pretty cool. But I did want to show that, and there's so much like newspaper evidence as well. I was going to show newspaper evidence. I honestly probably will show video evidence as well later on, because there's some video evidence that was found very recently, by the way. But I don't know how well it's going to pop up with the sharing of the screen, but I'll try. Anyways, moving forward with more evidence. In 1911, the Lovelock Cave in Nevada ended up being explored whenever two miners were forced to go in there to get back excrement. And they ended up finding 45 giant skeletons that had been mummified so well and preserved so well that their red hair was still attached to their skulls. Also, they showed at the entrance of the cave that it was extremely blackened, showing that an intense fire had occurred there, such as the one that came from the Paiutes that ended up putting all the wood and brush over them and then shooting their flaming arrows. Soon after they found these 45 giant skeletons, the University of California was told, and they started doing excavations, and they found large pots and bowls and stones with unknown languages. The mummies were anywhere from 6 to 8 feet long. It said that the younger, like juvenile giants, were probably closer to the 6 feet, or in the 6 foot range. And many of the artifacts are still shown in the Nevada museums, but the bones and the mummies themselves have gone missing. In 1924, they found new artifacts in the cave, including duck decoys that were being used to bring in bait to hunt on the nearby lake, or so it was thought. And the Museum of Natural History nor the Smithsonian would not would ex- the Museum of Natural History nor the Smithsonian, oh my gosh, I can't speak, would not accept the new artifacts found, which is odd. In 1940, another cave was found that had mummies of giants. However, this ended up being covered up for at least 60 years by authority. And in Nevada, a couple ended up exploring a cave and found two giants' remains and gave it to a nearby museum. However, the newspapers declined to cover the stories, and the mummy was forgotten about until 1996. In 1996, a scientist at the university ended up using a brand new device to date back the specimens, and it was found out that they were 10,000 years old. And prior to this, it was believed that that area was inhabitable 10,000 years ago. But after further testing, it was also found that the giants were of Caucasian descent, specifically Nordic. However, again, the mummies ended up going missing. Where are all these mummies going? Many giants' remains were in the Smithsonian until the 1990s, whenever the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act went into law, the NAGPRA law, which is crazy. Okay, so here's the thing. So that's a whole protection act, right, for Native American graves. So all these remains were removed, and it was said that they were given to the Native American tribes. There's no one to, I mean, I guess people can, what's the word I'm looking for? Why can't I think of this word? Attest to that. But there have been a lot of there's been a lot of discourse that a lot of them have just straight up been lost, including the giants that were of Caucasian descent. That wouldn't go back to native tribes because it doesn't come from their lineage. So even the person that I was watching this video from the History Channel was like, we don't know if the Native American tribes took it or who took it. But they ended up also explaining that the cave or the tomb that the mummies were found in was destroyed later on, the burial site, by dynamite. So they're not sure who ordered that. But I wanted to come back to the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, right? I find that really crazy that that's intact because about 10 years ago, probably longer now, there was a water line that was put through, I think it was South Dakota. Pretty sure it was South Dakota. So that was through, I'm pretty sure that went through Native American graves. I know that it went through their reservation, but they wanted this water line to be put through. And there were a lot of protests that were done. I think they ended up putting the water line in anyways. It's just it grinds my gears at a level that I don't know. It just bothers me. It just irks me. I'm not gonna get into it. I'm gonna take a deep breath. Okay, so moving forward, there have been multiple occasions where the Smithsonian will go and quickly buy remains and artifacts that were found, but they never present them to the public. And many mummies have gone missing to this date, and newspapers. In early 1900s, newspapers would decline to report on different mummies found and artifacts as though they were being censored. So, moving on to current events. So it's said that giants still live in caves in the Himalayas and that are said to have their own language and they prefer to stay hidden. It's also said that no more giants live in the Patagonia region or in North America, but it could just be that they're really good at hiding and they don't want to be found. I feel like a lot of Bigfoot stories seem to align with that. And there's also the theory that maybe they're just staying hidden because of all of the different wars that they've had with humans. Nowadays, giants are seen as, just lore. They're just seen as cryptids. But in 1848, whenever Abraham Lincoln went into office, he wrote a speech that included talking about giants, and everyone was okay with it. Everyone just knew that it was a part of history. So the question is, what changed? Like, why were giants removed from history? And I mean, there's still gigantism that's still around in society today. Like, for example, I went to school with a kid who suffered from gigantism. He was about 6'8" as an eighth grader, and he wore about a size 18 or 20 shoe at the age of 13. I'm not sure if he's still alive. I feel like a lot of people who have this diagnosis will pass away at a much earlier age because usually they deal with heart problems or organ problems, like Andre the Giant, for example, from Princess Bride. But I mean, if you want to see gigantism in in our society, just look at basketball players. I mean, the tallest basketball player is 7'7". That's Sun Ming Ming. There was also that video that came out on TikTok last year about a guy who ended up seeing a giant running on a mountain. And then after that, he ended up posting that really weird apology video saying that he had made it up after he had seen cars outside of his home following him. So the question is, why are they wanting us to cover this up? But if you do like Bigfoot and you do like, you know, looking into all that kind of stuff, if you ever want to go to the museum that's dedicated to Bigfoot, go to Bailey, Colorado to the Sasquatch Outpost. And as technology progresses, there have been more and more recent sightings of Bigfoot that have been caught on camera. And I actually have two different videos. I'm not sure if they're going to pull up the sound with them, with the way that my computer is set up. And again, if you're just listening, I know on Spotify the YouTube video or like the video is available and it will be available on YouTube as well. Um, but moving forward, so there is the Colorado train footage from last year that there's a Colorado train ride that you can do from, I think it's from Durango to Silverthorne. I don't know if that's the same one as the Georgetown one that goes all the way up to Manitou Springs. Um, but basically, these people were on a train and they ended up looking over trying to get video of elk, and they ended up getting a video of someone that looked like Bigfoot. And then the Bigfoot creature tried to hide in some bushes, and I'll show the video. And then there's also the Patterson film, which was someone who ended up spotting Bigfoot, and they ended up getting a clearer footage, and that was from 1967. So I have two of those pulled up. So I will show them now. Okay, look at me. I'm so savvy. I'm so tech savvy. Okay, so here is from last year in Colorado. Okay, and here is the next video. This is from 1967. And that just kind of looks like, I mean, that just looks like a large ape to me, but I don't know. I would be terrified. I know that there are a lot of people who are very big Bigfoot fans, especially out here in Colorado. I have met a Lyft passenger in the past who was a Bigfoot advocate, and he would go on camping trips, and he said that he had seen Bigfoot. I feel like he said that he actually had video footage of it, but I'm not sure. But every person that I've met who loves Bigfoot is very passionate about it. There's also a database online that keeps track of the different numbers of Bigfoot sightings by state. And while Washington is the leading state, I think they had like 742 sightings. Colorado is not far behind. We are in the top 10. And I also found out that there is a festival every year for Bigfoot in Willow Creek, California. It is called the Bigfoot Days. So I know that every person that I've met, like I said, who believes in Bigfoot is very passionate about it. And honestly, after this research, I might join them. Will you? That's the question. So, closing up, I wanted to say that what I'm grateful for, I am grateful for the hike that I was able to take yesterday. It was a beautiful spring day. It was like a 3.5 mile hike, so I'm really proud of myself. And I'm also just thankful that everything's going really well at home with my family and that I am close with the small amount of family that I do have. And I usually only give you one song or maybe two songs a week. I have three songs this week. So I have Hope by Emily Brimlow, Blame Brett by The Beaches, which is an all girl band, and you should definitely look them up. They're newer. I love all girl bands, so look them up. They're pretty great. And the third is Objects in the Mirror by Mac Miller. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed this episode. It took a lot of research, and I hope that you guys have wonderful weeks, and I will see you next week.